Right now, this is not speculation, not rumor, not anonymous chatter floating around social media. This morning, just hours ago, a series of extraordinary developments unfolded that are sending shockwaves through political circles in Washington, New York, and beyond. At approximately 8:42 a.m. Eastern Time, multiple major outlets began confirming that senior aides surrounding Donald Trump had stepped in behind the scenes in what insiders are describing as an unprecedented effort to contain what they are calling a full-scale reputation meltdown. By 9:15 a.m., new reports surfaced indicating internal emergency calls among legal advisors. And at 10:03 a.m., sources familiar with internal communications revealed that damage control operations had already been underway for days, quietly, aggressively, and urgently. Here's why this matters. This is not just about political optics. This is about control. Who has it? Who's losing it? And what happens when a political machine built on dominance suddenly shows cracks? These are public records. These are documented statements. These are confirmed timelines. Anyone can look this up and verify. And here's the reality. What's happening right now could reshape not only a political narrative, but potentially legal strategies, campaign dynamics, and historical legacy itself. So stay with me, because what we're about to break down will completely change how you understand what's happening behind the scenes. And before we go any further, subscribe right now and turn on notifications. You won't see this level of detail or this kind of breakdown anywhere else. Before anyone dismisses this as gossip or partisan noise, let's establish the context. Here is exactly how things unfolded. For weeks, there had been subtle signals, unusually cautious public messaging, delayed responses from official spokespeople, and noticeably restrained appearances from key allies. Then came a series of triggering events. First, legal developments began accelerating. Court filings began stacking up, each carrying language that analysts described as increasingly serious in tone. Second, internal campaign dynamics reportedly shifted. Longtime strategists started taking a more visible role in messaging decisions. And third, perhaps most significantly, multiple public appearances showed something observers rarely associated with Trump's public persona: hesitation. Political historians point out that control of narrative has always been central to Trump's influence. His brand has been built on projection of strength, dominance, and certainty. But according to multiple reports, aides began quietly intervening to manage messaging, not just externally, but internally. Before anyone dismisses this as routine political management, understand this. Former senior officials have described this level of coordinated intervention as highly unusual. One veteran campaign strategist put it bluntly in a public interview: "This isn't standard communication support. This is containment." And that brings us to the central question: what exactly happened behind the scenes to trigger this level of response? Let's break down what actually happened, step by step, chronologically, because when you see the full sequence, the picture becomes far clearer and far more explosive. It begins with a series of internal communications reported to have taken place late last week. According to multiple accounts, senior aides became concerned about escalating reactions to ongoing legal scrutiny. Not the legal cases themselves; those had been ongoing for months, but the tone, the frequency, and the unpredictability of public responses. Here's the kicker. Insiders say this wasn't about disagreement over policy or strategy. It was about stability. Multiple sources describe an increasing urgency among advisors to limit unscripted statements, particularly those relating to past events and historical narratives tied to ongoing investigations. Things get absolutely explosive here, because what emerged next was something rarely seen in modern political operations: a coordinated effort to control historical framing. In other words, not just responding to present events, but actively attempting to shape how past actions would be remembered, interpreted, and discussed. This just got even crazier. What's going through your mind? Comment your honest take. According to documented reports, aides began working to align messaging across legal teams, political advisors, and public communications. The goal? Consistency. But critics argue the deeper goal was something more strategic: narrative preservation. Stay with me. Because this is where it gets even more significant. Former federal prosecutors reviewing the situation publicly noted that attempts to influence narrative timing often occur when legal stakes intensify. They explained that public perception can indirectly influence jury pools, political support, and negotiating leverage. And then came another development. Internal briefings reportedly began focusing on reputation management timelines extending years into the future, not weeks or months. That's unusual. Most political crisis management focuses on immediate impact. But planning for historical legacy suggests a much deeper level of concern. Drop a comment right now if you saw this coming, because analysts say this signals something profound: a shift from short-term crisis response to long-term narrative defense. Then this morning, everything accelerated. Multiple outlets confirmed aides had stepped in to limit certain public engagements, not cancel, limit. That distinction matters. It indicates an effort to maintain visibility while reducing unpredictability. And here's something critical. Public records show that legal teams also increased coordination with communications advisors during this same time frame. That overlap is rare. Typically, legal and political messaging operate separately to avoid conflicts. But in high-risk scenarios, they converge. And that convergence is exactly what observers say we're seeing now. Smash that like button if this is making sense so far, because what comes next is perhaps the most revealing part of this entire situation. We're halfway through this explosive story, and here it is. According to analysts reviewing the timeline, there appears to be a pattern. Notice how this follows the same playbook seen in other high-profile political crises. First, denial and dismissal. Second, narrative reframing. Third, coordinated message control. Fourth, long-term legacy management. But wait, it gets worse, because the speed at which these stages unfolded this time is dramatically faster than historical precedents. Experts say that acceleration often indicates intense internal pressure, and that leads us directly into the implications. Here's what makes this situation even more significant. This isn't just a communications issue. It's a legal, political, and historical convergence. From a legal standpoint, coordinated messaging during ongoing investigations can raise complex questions, not necessarily wrongdoing, but risk. Former prosecutors note that public statements can sometimes become evidence if they contradict documented facts. That's why legal teams often advise restraint. From a political standpoint, this level of internal intervention signals something deeper: concern about stability of leadership perception. Political strength is largely psychological. It relies on consistent projection of confidence. When aides visibly step in, it can signal vulnerability. And from a historical standpoint, the effort to shape narrative now suggests awareness that future interpretation is already being contested. One historian described it this way: history isn't written years later anymore. It's being written in real time. If this blows your mind, hit that like button right now, because we're about to talk about what to watch next. 3 specific things. First, messaging consistency. If you begin to see unusually uniform language across multiple spokespeople, that signals centralized control. Second, legal pacing. Watch whether court responses become more measured and less reactive. That often indicates deeper strategic recalibration. Third, public appearances. Frequency, tone, and format will reveal whether stabilization efforts are working. Because here's the reality: this is not a single event. It's a turning point. Notice how this follows a broader pattern in modern political crises. Rapid escalation, immediate narrative battles, and long-term legacy positioning happening simultaneously. If you understand why this matters, you're ahead of 99% of people, because most observers focus only on headlines. But the real story is always in the patterns, and the pattern here suggests a transition from dominance to defense. So let's recap what we know. This morning's developments confirm that senior aides have stepped in during a period of escalating legal and reputational pressure. Public records and verified reporting show coordinated efforts to manage messaging, stabilize perception, and shape long-term narrative outcomes. This is unprecedented, not because political figures face crises. That's common. It's unprecedented because of the scale, speed, and level of intervention now being reported. What happens next could influence legal strategies, political positioning, and historical interpretation all at once. And that makes this moment potentially one of the most consequential turning points in modern political narrative management. Stay with this story because it's still unfolding in real time. The stakes are enormous. The implications are long-term. And the next developments could reshape everything we think we know about control, influence, and power in the political arena. Hit that subscribe button because you won't want to miss what happens next.